sure that at one time or another, you've all heard the marketers utter that old cliche that I know that 50% of my marketing works, I just don't know which 50%. Well, we hope to provide some insight into that today and share some data based on consumer research that we conducted on what is actually working and what is not working so well in terms of different forms of marketing. We're excited to be here today and share our findings, present some of our own observations relative to those findings, and hopefully at the end get some of your feedback and reaction. So take a look, what the most effective means of marketing might be, and we're going to examine a variety of different tactics today. Look at the guy in the upper left. Is it telling consumers all about your product even when they really don't want to hear it, or perhaps they even already know it? Is it using real everyday people like the consumers themselves to help spread the word about your brand? How about the excited person in the upper right? Do contests and sweepstakes do enough to create excitement, engage listeners, and develop buzz for your brand? On-air personality endorsements, are they believable enough? Do listeners really have enough trust in these folks? And then you see our little friend in the lower right. You know, marketing experts have proclaimed that we are in a content marketing revolution. Is custom content really the best way to the consumer's hearts and I guess eventually to their wallets? But we're going to try to sort all this out for you as we go through our presentation. Just in case you've heard about us, that's what we look like. Well, actually, those are real pictures of us. We're a 40-year-old marketing company, CRN International. We've done a ton of marketing campaigns for hundreds of the world's largest brands. While we employ any and all media that best meet the specific objectives of our clients, we found that we've had the most success using radio as one of the principal elements, and we use radio as a catalyst to some of the other media that's become popular in recent times. So today's agenda, here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to focus on each of these marketing tactics with research that we have done. We surveyed consumers and we asked them about these tactics and how they respond to them and what they think of them. We're going to get into all of that. Now, our survey questions, we asked about radio listening specifically, but I'm going to offer the suggestion to you that as you hear the results and hear what we're talking about, that I think you'll see that the findings are applicable to other media as well. Think about it. Don't think about it so much as the medium that they responded to, but they're responding to the different tactics. I would suggest to you that we might be able to apply these on a broader scale. We're going to give you throughout, as we talk about these tactics, recommendations on how to market and how to use radio more effectively. You asked the question, do we believe radio can be used more effectively than it's currently being used? Our answer to that is most definitely. So before we get into our specific findings, what we found in our research, I'm going to turn it over to Rob for a second. Just take a second to put radio into some perspective.
Thanks, Jim. So I just wanted to run real quick through radio and the listenership and the overall approach to radio. So if you're looking to find 244 million Americans, radio is quite a substantial tool for you to use. It reaches about 92% of Americans every week, and the numbers go up from there. So some might be surprised that it actually reaches 93% of all millennials, which is the highest of any medium, and for Gen Xers it gets even higher at about 94%. So just continuing to set the stage a little bit more into insights into the industry, it's about a $16 billion industry, run primarily through spot advertising. And statistically, radio accounts for between 8 and 15% of the overall ad budget. And what I like to point out is it's often forgotten, but you know, it's the most used broadcast medium that gets closest to the point of purchase. So what does that mean? It means people are listening to the radio right before they go to the stores, which I find to be quite a compelling reason to use radio. So moving on, you know, I like to look at this slide as sort of a new perspective on radio. It's transformed over time and stayed current as things have come and gone, and it's kept the best of what was old as far as the live and local nature of things. You know, with an emphasis on being conversational and being a companion when people are in their cars. However, it's also grown with the times and as more technology has become available. It's actually made a substantial use of social media, giving people more direct access to not just callers, but actually being immersed in the radio station and the lives of their listeners. So when you listen to the radio these days, you'll find a lot of social interaction. You'll find They not only take callers, but they take tweets and they take Facebook posts and news feeds, all sorts of different ways to engage people conversationally into the actual programming of the station. And from a personal perspective, it's taken on sort of a new dimension with the way digital radio has become more prevalent. And what I mean by that is, you know, people can create their own stations and their own playlists and their own artist stations and create an entire personal station based on the songs that they like. So that's the way I like to look at radio today, as far as the sort of transformed medium that's kept current with the times.
So, you know, reach and exposure are terrific, but I think at the end of the day, when you talk about radio, it's really, is it serving a purpose? Is it driving people to action? And again, well, you know, before we set the stage for our own research, let's take a look at this slide, which indicates in a national survey of Americans ages 12 and up. Take a look at some of these numbers. I mean, they're in the 40% area. You know, 43% said they visited a restaurant that they heard advertised on the radio. That's great stuff. They visited a store that they heard advertised. They even attended an event or performance. Okay, great stuff. If you look down a little bit further, you know, talked about the ad or product with others, and then skip one, recommended advertise product to others. That's, you know, that's advertising working at its best. It's really viral, and you've got the people who are hearing the ad spreading the word, almost serving as brand ambassadors for the product. So, you know, very powerful statistics. I also find it interesting that 38% watched an advertised TV program. So you've got TV, another popular medium, advertising on radio to draw people back to TV. And of course, the bottom two, visited the advertiser's website and called the advertised product a store. Those, I guess, are the home runs when you have the listener just directly engaging with you and the brand. So having set the stage, let's take a look at our findings, radio messaging, and what makes consumers buy. The methodology, here's what we did and how we did it. We did an online survey, which we conducted back in June. We got 525 fully completed responses. The respondents, just a little bit of their demographics, they represent all levels of radio listening. In fact, 94% said they listened to radio at one time or another, and we have the demographics to really specify how active a listener they were. Ages 18 and up, household incomes, the minimum was $25,000. I should tell you it's not up there, but 34% of the respondents said their household income was greater than $100,000. They represent all education levels, all geographic regions. So a couple of points, but just to help understand this. They pertain to radio listening, age, income, and education closely mirror the demographics that are reported by other full-time research houses who typically follow this industry. So we felt that our control group was right in line with other research that we've seen. I mean, just for example, 94% say they listen to radio, ages 18 and up. The graphic that Rob showed a few slides earlier was 92% at ages 12 and up listen to radio. So I'm not going to go through all the other individual demographics, but they really mirror nicely the general research base that we've used in the industry. You'll also notice when I say 94% listen to radio, well, 6% of our respondents said they do not listen to radio. So I want to let you know that as we go through these findings in all the charts, we've excluded that 6% that said they don't listen to radio because we just didn't feel that their answers to the other questions would be meaningful. I'm just going to just give you a quick snapshot on the buying influence of the people that took our survey. We asked them, what product categories have you bought or considered buying over the last 12 months? And I'm not going to run them all down, and those percentages. Again, we can get you this information later if you really want to take a closer look, but you can see all different categories represented by our base. Also, all different product categories that typically invest in radio. So I think it's a nice match there. In terms of the types of questions, I just want to spend a second on this, and we'll remind you as we get to the results, just so you understand the difference of what we've done, okay? We asked comparative questions in some cases, which forced the respondents basically to name one of the tactics, that this is the tactic that best answers the question for me, okay? We also asked analytical by tactic. We took a very granular look at each tactic and asked the respondents what they thought of that in terms of likability and influence of purchase, regardless of not comparing with the others. And we also asked what I'm going to call agree-disagree statements. We offered a statement and asked the respondents to respond to it. And some of these were designed to test very specific hypotheses that we had about radio messaging in the marketplace. So some of the categories you'll see, we have some of the topics in different manners, just to see what kind of results they generated. So in terms of the general highlights, Rob?
So here's what we found. It's quite interesting what we figured out. But traditional commercials are turned out to be, based on survey responses, less effective, yet the most prevalent. And there's probably good reason for the widespread use of commercials. I mean, they've been used for a long time. There's a lot of good rationale behind it. A lot of brands have been successfully built on commercials. They're an excellent way to deliver complex messages, or if your awareness is low, you can really pound away with a lot of frequency with commercials, and they often give you some good opportunities for retail partnerships. For example, when sharing a commercial, you can partner with a retail partner share it with them for additional in-store display. So, although some of the survey findings were that the commercials were less effective, there's still good reason to use commercials. However, what we have found is custom content is the marketing form that's most likely to engage people and make them consider purchase. So you'll see through some of the survey results that we're about to reveal that there was an overwhelming majority of people who did prefer hearing messages in the form of custom content. We also found that testimonials fared extremely well, and they were from everyday people, not the celebrity types that we're also common with, but just people in their towns who are similar to them, who are considering similar purchase decisions as they are. And although it's not on this slide, contests also perform surprisingly well, contests and sweepstakes, sort of delivering a message in an exciting environment with a chance to win a prize. So getting to the first actual question that we asked people what form of messaging interests them the most when they listen to the radio. So this was one of those comparative questions, and you can see it's pretty clear to be seen on this slide that custom content was the overwhelmingly preferred form of messaging. So we compared content to commercials, to endorsements, to real people testimonials, to appearances and contests. So it's not exactly surprising that content was the most interesting. However, the gap was actually interesting. So as Jim alluded to before, some people like Harvard Business Review said we're in a content revolution. But I always think back to, in the 90s when Bill Gates famously said content is king. He coined that term, content is king, and he talked about how the long-term winners will be the ones who deliver information and entertainment. And so you can see now more than ever in the marketing world that we're in, it's still more true now than ever with delivering a message in the context of information and entertainment that people want to hear. So now let's take a look at, so we listened to interest, but now let's take a look at how things fare as far as what would drive purchase consideration. You'll see here that content, again, performs the best out of the tactics, and you'll notice a shift upwards of how commercials perform slightly better. And this could be because of the nature of a commercial. It's very brand-driven, it's very call-to-action-driven, it's very direct sell language. So you can see how, although people might be slightly less interested, it does perform somewhat better in considering purchase. But again, content was the overwhelming driver in considering purchase of a product. It actually delivered on a 2-to-1 ratio, so twice as many people said that they would consider purchasing a product if they heard custom content over had they heard a commercial. I'd also just like to point out too, if you look at the slide down a little bit more, you can see how well these real people testimonials did preferred, giving you about 20% of the respondents saying that is the type of messaging that would actually drive purchase for them. So let's move along. Okay. Jim's going to take you through a little bit about spot radio commercials and their impact in the survey.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at more of the analytical by tactic, and this is the first tactic we're going to take a look at. How much would hearing a radio ad increase your chances of buying a product? Now, before we start looking at these numbers, although I'm sure you're looking at these numbers, let's remember the earlier slide that we showed a little bit earlier about radio driving behavior and response, and we listed a bunch of steps, a bunch of action steps that people took after hearing a radio ad? If you recall, most of the answers in that were in the neighborhood of 40% or low 40s, high 30s. Well, take a look at the findings here. This slide is very much in step with that one. Here we got about 41% indicate that hearing a spot ad would have an effect on them. Now, unfortunately, very few people felt that it would have a strong impact. You see, less than 4% answered the very in that category. And, you know, traditional ad spots, you know, by far, as Rob said, are the most widely used tactic when it comes to, messaging. And we know that many brands have been built on the success of spot ads. So certainly an effective tactic. The question is how effective compared to some of the others. In this case, I think the numbers kind of line up with general research. Let's go to the next one. So how long do you typically listen to radio commercials? We didn't put any parameters on this. We didn't tell the audience, the respondents, where the commercial is, what it sounds like, anything. Just how long do you typically listen, and let's see what they came up with, okay? So I don't want to make any judgments based on the results, so let me just ask, hypothetically, if you're a brand manager or advertiser, would you be pleased to know that about 1/3 of consumers, at least according to our findings, listen to most of a commercial? Because that's what happened. That's what we got here. Or would you look at it, you know, this is like glass half empty, glass half full. Would you be troubled to know that 2/3 of the audience say they don't listen to most of a commercial? Okay? We also broke down, you can see we broke down very specific intervals of how long they listen. I don't want to get into all of those. I think suffice to say, 2/3 of the audience said they don't listen to most of a commercial. What I will point out, though, is if you look all the way at the bottom, don't listen to commercials. I think that's of particular note that 18% said they just don't listen to radio ads at all. And, you know, these are people, keep in mind, we already took out of the survey the people who said they don't listen to radio ads. So they're certainly, I mean, listen to radio at all. So they're certainly, active listeners. Another finding relating to this, which you won't see up there because we didn't do a slide, but in that all-important 18 to 34 age category, the numbers get a little less favorable, and closer to 30% say they listen to most of a commercial. Okay, let's go to the next one. Commercial stop sets. How long is too long? When we say stop sets, you know, these are the breaks where a series of ads all run consecutively. I guess they could range anywhere from 5 or 6 or 7 ads, maybe as high as 10, depending on what you're listening to. So findings and see how long people really listen. Let's flip to the next one. So when several ads in a row come on, how many do you listen to before tuning out? Okay, and what jumps out at us, again, is 2/3 of the respondents say they don't make it past the first ad. Okay, 34% say, you know, I'll listen to one ad, then I'm out of there. Of the remaining 66%, okay, you're going to lose another half of them who say they don't make it past the second ad. And then by the time the third ad is done, you have about 13% of your audience left. You know, I mean, this just emphasizes the importance of positioning and that all-important first spot, which is so important. Keep in mind, when the first ad comes on, it might catch some listeners off guard because it's not as if they say, okay, here's our commercial break. But once you're into that first ad, you know that a series are going to appear. So the first ad, I think, just has kind of a built-in advantage if you have to be positioned any place. Okay? Now, these findings, I want to talk about these findings a little bit because this is in contrast to earlier studies by Nielsen that show a longer retention of the lead-in audience. So you're going to say, all right, so why the discrepancy? Well, the best I can do to explain it is Nielsen uses a device called portable people meters, PPMs, which actually measure radio exposure and how much switching from one station to another actually takes place. Whereas our survey is a little bit more emotional, and we're just asking consumers, in effect, how actively or passively are you actually listening and paying attention? So I hope that helps just a little bit about trying to explain that. So, you know, again, we think that these, you know, trade spots, they have traction, they've been used effectively in some instances, but they're not necessarily the most effective means of marketing. So we're going to turn to custom content. Rob, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so if you go to the next slide. So I thought we would take a minute because it did far and exceed all the other tactics. I thought we'd take a minute and just define what it is. And so I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but there are some key points to draw out of this. And that is the fact that it's useful and entertaining information. It's designed from their point of view, and it advances the brand. So the keys to creating content are creating something that informs and entertains and actually helps the listener or viewer, if you're thinking of another medium, to either, gain information, provide a tip, learn something new, or to explore their local territory a little bit more. So we go to the next slide. And so we thought we'd play an example. One way to really, get a feel for what custom content is through an example. So here's an example from Absolute 100. They were launching a super premium vodka, but they realized it wasn't good enough to just, talk about it or simply describe it or call it super premium. Those would just be words from a marketer looking to kind of cram some labels onto a product. So they instead decided to, embody this lavish lifestyle, this super lavish lifestyle. So they decided to share ways to live that lifestyle and took a look at the local places in key cities that somebody can go to live in a more upscale lifestyle. So what they did was, they gave useful information, places to go and things to do to live this lifestyle. And so they took a minute and tried to consider the listener's point of view. They tried to give them something that can be used, something that can enhance their life, while at the same time advances the brand with associating it with a lavish lifestyle. So let's take a quick listen to what Absolute 100 did.
With Absolute 100, a bold, new, super premium Absolute brings you the Absolute 100 places to light up the night in D.C. Like a Lotus Lounge, as Serenity welcomes you with a trickling water wall and floating lotus ponds, this ultra-chic club quickly transforms into a futuristic scene. Also on K Street, discover Lima, a sexy Latin-inspired lounge featuring amazing food, but an even more thrilling multi-level club energy. Finally, for a more intimate setting, a few doors away, there's a hot and sexy tattoo bar, a provocative atmosphere that offers an awesome alternative to the street's mega club. Absolute 100, proud to sponsor the Kanye West Glow in the Dark tour, ignited by Absolute 100. For Kanye West-inspired Absolute 100 cocktails and tour information, visit absolute.com/Kanye to light up your night in D.C. with Absolute 100. Must be 21 or over. Absolute 100 vodka, imported by Absolute Spirits Company, New York, New York. Enjoy it with absolute responsibility.
So you had a chance there to just see that they got all their branding in, they even got their legal requirements. But what they did do is they took the time to dig deeper into their lifestyle and give them something useful. So you can actually listen to this each day and hear something new to do each night in your own city. And so by doing that, Absolute was able to find a way to drive greater recall and greater retention of their messages. Let's go to the next slide. So digging deeper into creating content, we asked people how much would hearing custom content increase their chances of purchasing that product, and 77% of the people agreed with hearing the custom content. 56% of the people agreed with the statement that hearing custom content increases the chances of purchasing that product. So why is custom content so popular? We found this definition from the Content Marketing Institution pretty helpful in figuring it all out. And so what they said was consumers have shut off their traditional world of marketing, and they can easily skip television advertising, they can ignore magazine advertising, and they've become so adept at online surfing that they can take in online information without a care for banners or buttons. So what that really means to me is that as marketers, what we need to do now is, rather than simply targeting or defining a demographic or figuring out which broadcast medium is going to reach them the best, we've got to create something that's going to draw people in and draw them to our brand. And so that's why content has become such a powerful tool for marketers, is that it gives you that means to draw people into your messaging, into your brand, while also delivering a lot of the key things that you need. So then we went a little bit further and asked people, if you enjoy getting information and tips that they can use. So this is about providing information and tips that can be used. And to me, the key part to this part was, did they remember? So what this slide really tells me is that they enjoyed getting the information, and it's also a message of receptivity and also memory recall. So although you're giving up a little bit of your time in sharing information, you're getting that back in terms of people remembering the message that you're trying to deliver. So when asked this question, 77% of the people agreed with the fact that they do enjoy getting the tips and they would actually remember and appreciate the brand. So that what that does for you is, you know, it further engages listeners in your message. It builds your brand, you know, equity. And if done correctly, it can actually cut media costs in some ways. Because if you're going to create content that radio stations would find useful for their listeners to hear, they'll consider that programming and often put it inside of their original programming, and even go a step further and air some on-air tune-in announcements telling people to listen in, and all the while your brand is all weaved all the way throughout that. So it's actually a nice little way to cut some of your media costs. And one additional benefit is if you do it right, it also gives you some multi-platform opportunities. And so what I mean by that is, if you create information that people want, it can actually be used in lots of different ways, not only on the air, but through social media, through video, through Vines, and all the different digital assets that are out there as well, as far as repurposing that information or tip that you created that people are craving and looking for. So with that, Jim's going to take you through the effectiveness of endorsements and testimonials.
Okay, let's get right to the numbers. We're going to take a look at the agree-disagree statement first. We'll mix up the order a little bit as it pertains to this category. So I would be more inclined to consider purchasing a product if the message came from either everyday people like myself or one of my favorite radio personalities. Again, we combined basically, you know, the idea of endorsements or testimonials into the same question, and it got a favorable reply. As you can see, about 54% agreement. What you'll see as we segment these two tactics is a clear preference for one, at least as far as the survey respondents went. But just to get you in the mood, let's flip ahead, we thought we would try to play a DJ endorsement and a real people testimonial. So do we have this clip?
As you're queuing up the clip, I just want everybody to listen into the keys to this endorsement, because what happens here is you'll hear a natural progression from the radio personality as he's going from his programming right into what he wants to talk about to the listener, and then weaves in the branding, the brand message that's key to deliver to the audience. So with that, let's take a listen.
And guys, mute your phone while this plays. Okay.
You can see, yeah. So you can see that it almost sounds like natural programming and natural discussion. You know, part of the programming, and before you know it, you're into the ad. So you know, in that case, I think you know, the radio personalities were well briefed, and they just made it sound very natural. And you know, that one in particular I thought was very effective. Let's take a look at. Go to the next one, Pete. Oh, okay, so now let's hear a real people testimonial, and then we'll talk about some of the numbers. So let's go to Graham. Yeah.
So what I found most interesting about that real person testimonial is that it was in fact real. So there were, you heard the way the guy talked. That was being heard in his local market. It was different than what was being heard in Boston and was different than what was being heard in Seattle. You get to communicate in the local dialect and the local accents of the people talking. It also didn't sound all that marketing. You heard people saying what they liked and cared about the truck, not what the marketer wanted to say about the truck. And that's what other people who are similar to them look for. One guy was looking for size, another guy was looking for storage, another guy liked the way the whole thing was designed. And so what's so powerful about that is that's how people shop, and they turn to others for, they're looking for similar things, and they turn to other people who are just like them to help them make those decisions. So we're actually using the power of that and harnessing it and actually broadcasting it on the air. So the power of real people testimonials comes from actually using real people talking in real ways.
Good perspective. Thanks, Rob. So when we get, let's just take a look at the next slide. So here we segmented how would hearing a DJ endorsement increase your chances of purchasing the sponsored product. Okay, so in terms of approval rating on this one, only 28% give it a thumbs up. That's an interesting finding, and I'll talk more about that in a second. I want to compare this with some other research that was done by University of Southern California, where 52% of the respondents in that survey said their favorite radio personalities influenced their opinion. Also in that survey, 51% said they would consider or purchase a product advertised during their favorite personality's show. So again, those were questions slightly differently worded, but why such a weak showing as it comes to DJ endorsements? It might be a question. Now, I think the DJ endorsement that we played for you is an example of when they're going to work. I think perhaps too often the proper vetting of getting the right personality and the proper training maybe doesn't take place. We've heard so many of these endorsements that sound like they're scripted and the personality is just reading it off and it just doesn't sound authentic or believable or convincing. So it really requires some training. Ideally, it requires the personality getting a familiarity with your product. I mean, it's hard to believe a radio personality, sort of pushing, dog food and trying to talk about dog food if they don't own a pet. So I think you really have to do the homework to make it work. Now let's take a look at how much would hearing testimonials from everyday people increase your chances of purchasing the sponsored product. Here you've got a much higher approval rating, if you will. It's 43% here versus what we saw as 28% for the DJ endorsements. And, as Rob was explaining, the truth is people respond better to messaging that's delivered by real, everyday people like themselves. It's more natural. It's easier to relate to. And, again, consider that example. The key, as Rob said, it's got to be real people. That's true. You can't have actors sounding like real people because our listening audience is sophisticated enough to usually see through that. For those of you out there who are scholars on the art of persuasion, in his book entitled Influence, a classic book on the whole topic, Robert Cialdini, I hope I pronounced that right, he notes, one successful way to sell a product to ordinary people is to demonstrate that other ordinary people like it and use it. So there you go. Let's move on to a new topic, contests, sweepstakes, and station events. Rob?
Okay. Thanks, Jim. So really what this question is all about is do branded contests increase your interest in that brand? And so 60% of the people said yes, it does increase their interest. And the feeling behind that is because there's still something in it for the listener. There's something in for the person to participate. There's a prize or a chance to win or an experience that's relevant to them. And the whole thing is delivered in this sort of exciting sounding message. And I can't overstress the importance of the word win. When people hear the word win, their ears perk up and they start paying more attention. And so when you mention that they've got a chance to win, and even from a radio perspective, where often the winners are in the same towns as people listening, people start to pay attention. So what I also, as I was taking a look at the results of this question, I also want to point out that this is just about hearing it. So think for a minute. This is how people would react to just hearing the message, not necessarily participating or not necessarily winning, But from the mass perspective, hearing this message is making people agree that they would be interested in learning more about the brand. So I thought that was an interesting nuance that I should point out as far as the difference between hearing the message and increasing interest by using a contest that way. From that perspective.
It's almost like, the old expression, let's follow the money. People, even if they're listening, they like to follow the money or follow the prizes and hear other people, with something at stake to hear how they're doing. So I think the concept, appeals in that regard.
Yep. So let's move on to the next slide. And so now we wanted to ask people, this is another often used tactic as far as radio appearances. And so we asked people if they would be interested in meeting personalities at a station appearance. And you can see not many people agreed to that question. And so it's actually not that big of a deal either, because the key to a radio station appearance is actually the on-air messaging, the on-air announcements, telling people to come down to this event to take part in something that feels bigger than it is, that sounds more exciting than it is. So I would point out that it's not the draw of the personality to the appearance, but more like the draw of the interest in the event. So I would stop for a minute and take some time to really think through, if you want to do an event that draws people down, create something that's going to be of interest to them. Don't just rely on the appeal of having a radio station host there. The real power is connecting your interesting event with the on-air announcements to tell people to come on down. And plus, there's also an added benefit. There's some studies out there that say when people do appear to be on the phone talking about something, there's this feeling that happens inside. So it's the old-fashioned radio station calling in live from an event, through that phone line. The sound of a phone line, believe it or not, makes people pay attention. They feel like they should be listening to some important information. So there's one other key to pay attention to if you are running an event, to kind of take as much advantage as you can of that all-important calling.
There's also the added value of once somebody gets to an event, even if they weren't anticipating, just people that are coming by, just passers-by. I think there's a factor there of passers-by that are going to relate and get excited and say, hey, what's this, and check it out, and I think that's all positive. Also, you could argue, is it a good thing or a bad thing that with so many forms of media available that, the local station personalities are probably much more visible and accessible than they used to be. So that could help create excitement around them. It also could dampen the idea that, hey, I'm going to get to see them and talk to them and hear them, when you kind of have that already on social media to some degree, but not always.
Yeah, Jim, that's a good point that I forgot to mention. So the key to also a radio station appearance is that sort of intercept feeling while they're down at your location. That feeling of, noticing a radio station van or a station 10 or their banners, and that desire to stop by and see what the radio station that you listen to is up to. So yeah, a good point in bringing that up, that there's that feeling of wanting to see what's going on if you do pass or occur upon the radio station at a location. Okay. So moving on.
Yeah, let's get to some of the recommendations. We've talked about a lot of these as we've gone through, but we just want to review some higher points and then get to some of the questions if you have them. Just on content, how valuable is your content? The truth is, consumers associate your brand with the value of the information or entertainment you're providing. So it's imperative that you do your homework, you develop content that your target audience really enjoys and needs, so you're not in the position of our little person there in the cartoon who is thrilled at marketing but doesn't know what in the world to write about. Also, I think there has to be a balance between the product messaging and the real content. Very important. Keep in mind, anything you're doing in any of these tactics is trying to advance the brand. So providing honest, relevant, solid information is going to much better set up the product message that you need to also include. I would say keep it fresh. If possible, depending on the volume of how often and the frequency that you're running, change it daily and change it where appropriate. Nothing sounds as stale as a message you heard the day before, especially if you're hearing something that isn't even appropriate from the dated standpoint, but at least try to change it up and keep it fresh. Title sponsorship. Actually, Rob had suggested I change this slide to title ownership. I didn't, but I respect his point on that. Yeah, well, it's important to show, and the point here is that you are providing the content rather than just paying a sponsor, or paying to sponsor somebody else's content. You know, Microsoft Presents rather than such and such sponsored by Microsoft. Subtle difference, but I think it goes a long way. And of course, you're going to want to promote online, extend online. As we said earlier, we see radio as a content conduit to spreading the message to other media. Just talking about, go back. Yeah, traditional ads, okay? As you saw, position counts, and certainly as it pertains to the research that we found, that you really need to be in that first position if you expect to get the kind of value that you're probably anticipating from running a spot ad. So absolutely important, position counts. Sometimes, whoop, nope, still there. We got itchy fingers here. Sometimes product specs, a couple more points here, trying to run me off the air. Sometimes product specs are necessary. So, you know, if you're a household brand that everybody has heard of, it's not so important for you to say, here's who we are and what we do and here's what our product is all about. But if you are not in that category, of which there are many companies, sometimes it makes perfect sense to share information about your product. You just need to say it. You need to get that out there. So, you know, again, it kind of depends where you're coming from, where your brand is, as to how detailed you get into doing traditional ads. One more point on traditional ads, again, it can strengthen retail relationships. If you can use ads as an opportunity to partner with retailers, sometimes, and Rob, help me with this if I'm not saying it right, but I think pretty much what you can partner with is you're going to get what's sometimes could be more valuable than the ad itself, and that is retail space, on, you know, appropriate, you know, on the counters in exchange for an ad.
Yeah, so what Jim's saying is we've seen some pretty smart marketers who take their commercial ad and share it with a retailer, you know, essentially sometimes splitting it in half and giving a free ad to some of their retail partners. But it gives their sales team the chance to say, I'm going to give you a free ad, but I want either a temporary price reduction, or I want more inventory on shelf, or I want a larger shelf space, or I want a display, or I want an end aisle display, and that can come from a marketer essentially sharing their radio commercial with a retail partner and then using the sales team to leverage that for space. So that's what Jim was getting at. Great. Okay, Rob. So just following out on a couple more recommendations, you know, if you're going to do endorsements, choose your endorser wisely. And what we mean by that is take the extra step to go beyond the surface level data. You know, take the step to find out if they can tell a story, if they're a good storyteller, if they personally use the product, if they would personally use the product. Take the time to make sure they've got the product in their hands before they're even going on the air, or they've had the chance to try the product or use the product in some way. And take another minute to just determine how closely do they match your target. So what I mean by that is go beyond just the age and the demographic, but dig deeper. Do they live the actual lifestyle of the person who you're trying to reach? Are they a mom? Do they have, you know, do they have multiple kids? Do they have one kid? Are they high income or, you know, mid income? Are they active lifestyles? Do they get out a lot? Try to do everything, you know, all the care that you place on targeting a consumer, you should also place on targeting an on-air endorser. The next step to that is training is of paramount importance. And what I mean by that is to actually not just feel like your script's going to do the job. I would actually recommend taking the script out of their hands. So take the time to get them on the phone or meet with them in person and talk to them about the product and let them talk about the product in their own words rather than giving them a script and hoping that they do fine with it. And oftentimes, endorsements can be extended beyond the airwaves. And so with the proliferation of social media and Facebook and Twitter and Vine and, you know, all the other digital assets available, a radio endorsement is taken on sort of a new means, and that is the on-air as well as the digital extensions, where they can talk about their products, post videos and user experiences. So moving on to testimonials, Jim touched on this a little bit before, but use real people. Don't use actors, and make sure those people live in the local towns where you're broadcasting. It takes a lot more effort, but it turns out in a much better, more authentic way. So use the people who are from the towns in the cities that you're broadcasting on, different people in different towns talking about the products. And as you heard in the Ram spot, let them talk about it in their own way. You know, don't put words into their mouth. Don't try to make them say marketing words. let them explore the product on their own and talk about their own opinions and thoughts behind that and why they would buy it. Moving on to contests and sweepstakes, the key to a contest and sweepstakes is to know, the do's and don'ts as far as what you can do as far as sweepstakes, what you can do as a contest, what classifies it as a contest or a sweepstakes, or what puts you into that murky area of being in a legal lottery. So if you are going to do a contest, make sure you're aligned with a pretty experienced organization that knows the ins and outs of running a contest and all the rules and regulations that go behind that. Once you get past that, think through how the contest is going to advance the brand. And so think through how you can match up the prize that's being given away with the actual brand of the sponsoring brand, and how you can use that exciting on-air announcement to communicate your key points, how that can all weave together and deliver a message that consumers are going to want to hear with a prize that they want to win that is closely connected to your brand. And so I think that is the end.
Almost the end. Yeah, one more.
We're still thinking.
Almost the end. So listen, any of this data we can break out by crosstabs with any of the demographics that might be useful to you. We have a detailed white paper that goes into all the findings. We'd be happy to share that with you. You can contact either of us at our email addresses. And I guess we have a few minutes left for some questions, as long as they're easy ones. What do you got?
Yeah, thank you, guys. To everybody who's been listening, thank you. We do have some time, as Jim and Rob mentioned, for Q&A. So if you want to indicate that you have a question, I'm happy to unmute your line and let you start asking. Look in the toolbox on the right. There's an area that says Q&A. Q&A or chat, either one. I'll see it, and we'll get your line live. While people may be typing, and I'm just going to throw out this general question to Jim and Rob. As my background as somebody who worked in multicultural marketing, radio was hugely important, just in terms of integrating with whatever promotions or marketing efforts out there. Why do you think radio it seems to have gotten sort of like, in some ways forgotten about? Is it just the race of all this, digital technology out here, or people don't understand it, or what? What do you think has sort of led to this? What I see as people just not sort of, think of radio as a kind of an afterthought, but not as part of their overall efforts.
Yeah, so that's like multiple questions embedded in your question. So to touch on the multicultural stuff first, I'm going to try to chop it up and let me know if I missed anything. But the multicultural stuff, radio is actually stronger in those markets. It's extremely strong in the African American market, and even stronger in the Hispanic market.
Right. Correct.
So an on-air personality in the Hispanic market carries a tremendous amount of weight. And it's often thought that that Hispanic or Spanish-speaking on-air personality is actually a link back to where their home market is from. So when somebody of Hispanic descent is listening to the radio, they often feel like they're going back home through the voice of the on-air personality. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic that happens there. Your next question is the way I look at it is there's a divide. Why is radio forgotten about? So there's two reasons for that. First, it's not nearly as glamorous as TV, So,
right. Yeah.
You don't have the sort of glamorous production. You don't have the exciting getaway shoot. You don't have the big creative drive towards producing great radio. So that's one reason. But the second reason is it's almost like there's a divide between a marketer and a listener. So if you talk to a radio listener, and like we touched on earlier, between 92 and 94% of Americans, depending on what your demographic is, listen to the radio. If you talk to a radio listener and just pick their brain a little bit, there is passion and friendship. It's funny because once I went to go hear Wendy Williams, who was a former radio personality,
right,
to be a really, really successful TV star and TV host. And she said it best. She said, the way, when I go and talk to my listeners when she was on the radio, they view me as a friend in their head. I'm a friend in the head of a lot of people. So it's funny that, if you talk to a listener, there's passion and camaraderie and, this feeling of connectedness to the on-air personality as well as the radio station. It's just the marketers are a little slow to catch up to that.
Right. Thank you for that. I'm going to get you a couple attendee questions.
You want me to read that, Rob? I can see it. Whoops, you just lost it.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, let's start with Anna's question. You see that one?
Oh. Yeah, go
Here.
ahead.
Should we read it? We should probably read that one.
Yeah, because it looks like Anna's maybe listening through a computer speaker, so I don't think I have a way.
Yeah, so we can read it. It says, if you have a 30-second spot to promote an offer, what would drive higher engagement and intent to purchase, including a storyline to add personality or talking about a product offer? So maybe using that time to reinforce the offer a second time. Let's think about it. Let's go back and try to divide it up. If you have so I think what she's getting at is if you have a limited amount of time and you've got a lot of things that you need to say, what would drive higher engagement? And so, going back to some of the results of the study, I would actually say to take that message and figure out a way to embed it in some content. So if we found that content is by far the most appealing and the most effective tactic for driving purchase, figure out what your consumer actually desires or needs or wants to hear, or is there a tip, is there advice, put aside your branding just for a second and think about your consumer, give them that advice, and then surround that with your branding. That might be one way to drive higher engagement and also deliver your call to action. And there's always this copy tip, if you have too many messages, you can always cycle it. So put message 1 in copy 1, put message 2 in your second bit of content. And so then getting into I think what you were also touching on in your question was, how do I make effective use of an endorser? And so I think you kind of answered your own question, because including that storyline does actually help to increase engagement. So if you can find a way to just put it in the hands of the personality and get the point across of what you want to make, tell them to weave your brand point into their personal story, and you've got a home run.
I mean, you have to create an environment that the consumers want to listen to at all. That's the first place, okay? You've got to grab their attention. Once you've got their attention, you'll be able to weave the offer in there, because, again, you have to advance the brand. It's not content for content's sake. It's content to help drive something else. So I think Rob said it.
Yeah, so Anna, thank you. That's an excellent question, and we appreciate that it gave us more excuse to talk about the things we like to talk about.
Let's take one more question. This one's from Melissa Sandler. We're going to just open up her line, and Melissa, you are on. Go ahead. Melissa?
Yes, hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
One of the questions was, people who took the survey indicated that they're interested in custom content, all other messaging choices. Is it pure content, or do you get the brand message in?
Yeah, another really good question. And yes, you do get the brand message in. So the idea is to deliver, if you go back to the Absolute example, you kind of heard it all in their example, where they gave the information that was useful and entertaining. They told people where to go for the night. And then they surrounded it with their branding. They delivered their brand call to action at the end. They told people about their legal requirements. So it still lets you do it all in a more engaging way. So that's a good question.
And I had a couple more. What results or takeaways did you find surprising?
I think first off, I would say the degree to which content marketing, sort of carried the day on our findings. I mean, I think when we did the survey initially, sometimes you have ideas as to which way it's going to go. I think the enormity of how much it seems to be the preferred messaging tactic. I think that was a surprise to me, and also I think the fact that contests and sweepstakes did as well as they did as a tactic. I guess when you see all of the some of the reality shows on television, and they're all contests, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise, but I thought it did pretty well. Rob, you have other thoughts on that?
No, you nailed that one.
Okay.
Great. So, I think we are at the end. I don't see any other questions out here, and want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you guys Jim and Rob, for sharing the results of this research. Some of you had questions. Yes, this deck will be available. We'll probably have everything, including a recording of this session, up on the BAA site. Tomorrow we'll be sending an email out letting you guys know where to take it. Just for full disclosure, we're going to ask you to take a quick 6-question survey, and then we'll give you the link. We wouldn't be good marketers if we didn't do that. So
Rob, sorry, real quick, there's also, I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but there's also a white paper available, and if anybody needs access to the full blown-out white paper,
my email,
contact Jim. And one other plug, what we forgot to mention is our little hashtag at the bottom, we_r_radio. So if you'd like to take part in an additional dialogue, definitely follow us there.
Great.
Sorry, Rob.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Squeeze it in. Everybody, thank you very much. If you want to join us, next week's webinar is on managing the legal and PR risk of social media with 2 folks from Davidson Gilbert Law Firm. We've already got about 70 people signed up for that, so maybe you guys might want to join us for that too, and find out how to be smarter about maneuvering and avoiding landmines in social media, and particularly also the PR downside. So that's next week, next Tuesday, the 23rd, 2 o'clock. We'll be right back here, and look forward to seeing you all then. Again, want to thank Jim, want to thank Rob, want to thank the entire team at CRN Radio. Definitely reach out to them. They are BAA members, and I'm certain that they look forward to connecting with all you guys. Thanks very much.